Welcome to True Crime Case Documentaries. In today's episode, we dive deep into a story of betrayal, secrets, and a tragic murder set in the quiet town of Riverdale, Georgia. In April 2015, the life of Tom Whitfield, a successful real estate agent, was violently cut short by someone he trusted most. Tom Whitfield was a 53-year-old man living in Riverdale. He was well known in the community, not just for his success in real estate, but for his larger-than-life personality. Working for Pinecrest Realty, Tom had spent over 25 years building his career, earning a reputation as a top real estate agent. He had a business degree from the University of Georgia and was well-connected, often seen driving around town in his sleek silver Cadillac with the license plate top sell. Tom had everything going for him, or so it seemed. Tom was married to Amanda Whitfield, a 37-year-old accountant at a local firm. Amanda had a hard past. She had been a single mother since she was 19, raising her daughter, Hannah Whitfield. Hannah, now 19 and a freshman at the University of Georgia, was studying psychology. To the outside world, they looked like the perfect family. Tom was the loving stepfather who had embraced Amanda and Hannah into his life when they married 5 years ago. Outside of work, Tom had a passion for boating. He owned a small sailboat named Clear Skies, which he often took out on Clearwater Lake, spending weekends sailing and relaxing. His friends at the local marina would often recall his bright smile and hearty laugh, always willing to help someone out or share a beer. But behind the Whitfield family's idyllic exterior lay dark secrets that would soon unravel. In the days leading up to his death, Tom had been busy closing a massive deal on a commercial property downtown. It was a career-defining moment for him, and he was looking forward to a surprise anniversary trip. He had planned for Amanda. He had booked a cabin in the Appalachian Mountains and even picked out a stunning necklace from a local jeweler, Simmons Fine Jewelry, to surprise her. But there was trouble brewing. Amanda had become increasingly suspicious of Tom's late-night work meetings and secretive phone calls. She confided in her sister that something felt wrong. Meanwhile, Hannah had grown distant from her mother, and Amanda couldn't help but notice the tension between Tom and her daughter. Neighbors, too, had heard the raised voices and arguments from the Whitfield home in recent weeks, with one neighbor, Brian Emerson, later recalling, "Something wasn't right in that house. You could feel it." On April 12, 2015, Tom Whitfield's life came to a violent and tragic end. At around 7:30 a.m., Brian Emerson, the 55-year-old retired teacher who lived next door, received a frantic call from Amanda. She was out of town visiting her sister in Atlanta and hadn't heard from Tom since the previous night. She asked Brian to check on Tom as she was worried. When Brian knocked on the Whitfield's door, there was no answer. Concerned, he tried the handle and found the door unlocked. Inside, the house was eerily quiet. Brian walked through the living room and into the kitchen, where he found signs of a violent struggle: chairs overturned, broken glass scattered on the floor. His heart pounded as he made his way to the master bedroom, where he found Tom's lifeless body lying in a pool of blood. Tom had been bludgeoned to death with a hammer, which lay on the floor nearby, still covered in blood. Blood spattered the walls, and the room was in disarray. Shaking, Brian backed out of the room and immediately dialed 911. His voice trembled as he explained to the operator what he had found, barely able to process the horror before him. Within minutes, Riverdale police arrived, led by Detective Laura Thompson, a seasoned investigator known for her sharp instincts, and Detective Dan Rogers, her calm and methodical partner. The investigation began immediately. The crime scene was chaotic and disturbing. Detective Thompson noted that Tom had clearly fought for his life. The hammer, likely the murder weapon, was bagged as evidence, and forensic teams began their work. They meticulously collected fingerprints, blood samples, and any fibers that could help lead them to the killer. Neighbors stood outside, whispering in disbelief as the police worked. Local news stations quickly descended upon the scene, with Channel 7 News covering the gruesome discovery as the town buzzed with rumors. The first person detectives interviewed was Amanda Whitfield. She appeared devastated and confused, insisting she had been in Atlanta visiting her sister, who confirmed her story. However, Amanda admitted she and Tom had been arguing in recent weeks, especially about his erratic behavior and late nights. She denied any involvement in his death, saying, "I loved Tom, he was my whole world." Detectives were also interested in Hannah Whitfield, Tom's stepdaughter. Hannah seemed nervous during questioning, avoiding eye contact as she told detectives she had been staying with a friend the night of the murder. When asked about her relationship with her stepfather, she hesitated, then revealed a shocking truth: she and Tom had been having an affair for the past 6 months. This revelation added a dark layer to the investigation. Hannah explained that the affair had started gradually but quickly spiraled out of control. She felt confused and guilty, torn between her mother and her stepfather. She admitted they had argued the night before his death, but she insisted she had nothing to do with his murder. Detectives began piecing together the events leading up to Tom's death, but nothing could prepare them for the complex web of secrets they were about to unravel. As detectives dug deeper into the Whitfield family's secrets, the investigation took a darker and more complicated turn. Hannah's admission about her affair with Tom raised more questions than answers. While her alibi for the night of the murder seemed solid, detectives couldn't ignore the emotional turmoil this affair had likely caused. But was it enough to drive her to murder? Detective Thompson, known for her ability to sense when someone was hiding something, couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. She asked Hannah to recount the events of that night once more. This time, Hannah hesitated longer, her voice shaky as she admitted that she and Tom had fought viciously about the affair. He wanted to end it, Hannah said, her eyes darting nervously. He said it was a mistake. But I didn't want to lose him. That one sentence shifted the entire tone of the investigation. Had Hannah's obsession with Tom spiraled into something dangerous? Had she lashed out in a moment of rage when he threatened to end their relationship? Detective Rogers, however, wasn't entirely convinced. He believed there was still someone they were missing. The detectives decided to look into the other family members and acquaintances. One name immediately jumped out: Karen Winslow, Tom's ex-wife. Karen was known around town for her fiery temper and a deeply contentious relationship with Tom, especially after their bitter divorce 5 years earlier. She had never accepted Tom's new marriage to Amanda, and many suspected that Karen still harbored a deep resentment toward her ex-husband. But that resentment have escalated into something far more dangerous. When detectives brought Karen in for questioning, she was defensive from the start. Her voice was sharp as she denied any involvement in Tom's death, but her anger toward him was palpable. "Tom destroyed my life," she spat, her eyes narrowing. "But do you really think I'd murder him? He wasn't worth it." Despite her denials, detectives couldn't ignore the volatile nature of their relationship. Karen had motive her hatred for Tom and his new family, and she was in town the night of the murder. But without concrete evidence, she remained just another suspect in a growing list. Then came a breakthrough. Forensic analysis of the hammer found at the scene revealed partial fingerprints, ones that didn't belong to Tom, Amanda, or Hannah. The prints matched someone unexpected: Brian Emerson, Tom's next-door neighbor and the man who had discovered the body. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation. Brian had been Tom's friend for years. Could he have been hiding something all along? Detectives brought Brian in for questioning once again. This time, his demeanor had changed. He seemed nervous, constantly glancing at the clock, as if he wanted to be anywhere but the interrogation room. When confronted with the fingerprint evidence, Brian stammered, offering a weak explanation about how he might have touched the hammer when helping Tom with home repairs a few weeks earlier. But Detective Thompson wasn't buying it. She pressed harder, pushing Brian to explain why his prints were on the murder weapon. The pressure was too much. Brian's calm exterior began to crack. His voice quivered as he finally admitted that he had known about the affair between Tom and Hannah, and it had enraged him. He was using her, Brian said, his hands shaking. "She's just a kid, and he manipulated her. I couldn't stand by and let it happen anymore." Brian's confession was chilling. He had killed Tom to protect Hannah from what he saw as a toxic and abusive relationship. But was it really about protection? Or had Brian developed his own dangerous obsession with Hannah? The detectives were left grappling with the idea that this entire tragedy had been driven by twisted emotions, secrets, and jealousy. In the end, Brian's confession led to his arrest. The case, which had started as a simple investigation into a brutal murder, had spiraled into a web of betrayal, hidden desires, and deadly consequences. As Brian was led away in handcuffs, Detective Thompson couldn't help but reflect on how this once seemingly perfect family had been torn apart by secrets that no one had seen coming. As the truth about Brian Emerson's involvement in Tom Whitfield's murder unraveled, the small town of Shady Creek was left reeling. But even with Brian's confession, Detective Thompson felt a nagging sensation that not everything had been uncovered. There were still too many loose ends, too many unanswered questions. Could Brian truly have acted alone? And what of the others whose lives had been intertwined in this web of deceit? Karen Winslow's name continued to echo in the back of Detective Rogers' mind. Her bitterness toward Tom had been palpable, and though Brian had confessed, the idea that she might have had a role in this tragic event couldn't be entirely ruled out. Detective Thompson agreed it was time to bring Karen back in for questioning. When Karen arrived at the police station for the second time, her demeanor had shifted. She was still defiant, but there was a noticeable edge of fear in her voice. Detective Thompson didn't waste time. "We know about Brian," Thompson began, her voice calm but firm. "We know he killed Tom, but we also know he wasn't acting alone." Karen's eyes widened ever so slightly, but she remained silent. "Brian told us everything," Rogers added, leaning forward. "He told us how you two planned this together, how you wanted revenge on Tom for everything he'd done to you." For a moment it seemed like Karen might crack, but then she let out a harsh laugh. "You think I teamed up with Brian? That man barely knows how to tie his shoes, let alone plan a murder with me." But as confident as Karen sounded, the detectives weren't convinced. They pressed harder, laying out the evidence they had gathered so far. The messages between her and Brian, the late-night meetings that had been caught on security cameras near her house. It all painted a picture of a dangerous partnership, one rooted in jealousy and years of unresolved anger. Karen's face turned pale. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice shaking for the first time. Brian came to me after he found out about Tom and Hannah. He was furious. He wanted to protect her, but I never told him to kill Tom. Then what did you tell him? Karen Thompson asked, her voice sharp. Because it sure looks like you pushed him over the edge. Karen's lips trembled, and finally the dam broke. She admitted that she had been involved in the planning, but she claimed it had only been to scare Tom to make him feel the pain he had inflicted on her for years. She swore she had never intended for things to go this far. I thought if we threatened him, if we scared him enough, he'd back off from Hannah. I didn't know Brian was going to kill him. But despite her tearful confession, the detectives knew better. Karen had played a much larger role than she was willing to admit. They now had enough evidence to arrest her for conspiracy to commit murder. As Karen was led out of the interrogation room in handcuffs, word of her arrest spread quickly through Shady Creek, the once quiet, picturesque town was now the backdrop for a murder case that had rocked its very foundation. Neighbors who had once smiled at each other over garden fences now whispered about the secrets that lay behind closed doors. But even with Karen and Brian behind bars, the case was far from over. Hannah, the young woman whose affair with Tom had set this entire tragedy in motion, was now under the harsh spotlight of public scrutiny. Though she had denied any direct involvement in the murder, her relationship with Tom had made her a key figure in the investigation. Detective Thompson couldn't shake the feeling that Hannah knew more than she was letting on. Was she truly just a victim in all of this, or had she been playing her own dangerous game? The detectives decided to visit Hannah one last time, hoping to get answers. When they arrived at her small apartment, Hannah looked like a shell of the confident young woman she had been. Her eyes were red from crying and her hands shook as she invited them inside. "You're not here to arrest me, are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We just want to talk," Detective Rogers replied, though his tone was heavy with suspicion. As they sat down, Thompson didn't waste time. "Hannah, we know about your affair with Tom, we know about Brian's obsession with you. But what we don't understand is how this all spiraled into murder. What aren't you telling us?" Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted any of this," she sobbed. "I loved Tom, but I didn't mean for him to die." "Then why didn't you come forward sooner?" Thompson asked, her voice steady. "Why didn't you tell us about Brian?" Hannah hesitated, wiping her tears with trembling hands. "Because I was scared," she whispered. "Brian was so intense. When he found out about Tom and me, he changed. He became possessive. He kept telling me that Tom didn't deserve me, that I needed someone who really cared about me. I didn't think he'd actually kill him." Hannah shook her head. "No, I swear. I didn't know until after it happened. When Brian told me what he did, I was horrified. But I couldn't go to the police. I didn't want anyone to know about the affair.